When we talk about the beginning of the First World War, we instinctively conjure images of trenches in Belgium or the heavy mobilization across Europe in August 1914.
Right.
But the first true shots of global conflict, the cracks in international agreements, they actually sounded out months earlier, and in places you might never expect.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the mission for this deep dive. We are zooming right into East Africa to understand how local colonial commanders, completely undermined official policy and basically dragged the continent into war.
Okay.
We're looking at those immediate flashpoints that just shattered the theoretical neutrality of Africa, specifically focusing on the really bizarre Maziúa incident and the fight for control over the Great Lakes.
So this isn't just a story about battlefields, then. It sounds more like decentralized war, where local decisions and maybe personal ambition just superseded high politics.
That's a great way to put it. We're exploring that critical moment when commanders out in the bush effectively decided, okay, the global war starts now, for us.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So the starting point, legally anyway, was the 1884 Congo Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
That agreement, signed by all the major colonial powers, was supposed to guarantee that if Europe went to war, the colonies in Africa would stay neutral. Sort of contain the conflict.
Yeah.
What happened to that idea when war actually broke out?
Well, it was dismissed almost instantly. I mean, it was a nice idea, perhaps, but politicians back in London and Berlin pretty quickly decided neutralization was, quote, impractical, for their own strategic interests.
Impractical.
And what's really fascinating here is the internal conflict brewing within German East Africa, that's modern Tanzania, which immediately just turned this theory to dust.
How so?
Initially, the German governor, a man named Heinrich Schnee, he actually tried to respect the spirit of that treaty. He declared coastal towns open cities, trying to limit the fighting.
Okay, seems reasonable.
But his subordinate, the commander of the German Colonial Defense Force, the Schutztruppe, Lieutenant Colonel Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck, he had a radically different view.
So how crucial was von Lettow-Vorbeck's role in kicking things off? Was he essentially working against his own governor?
He was the direct antagonist, really. He saw the war in Europe not as a problem to be contained, but as an opportunity.
An opportunity out.
He explicitly declared the Congo Act non-applicable on August 7th, 1914. Just completely overrode Governor Schnee's caution. His goal was simple: cause maximum distraction, tie down British forces in Africa, divert resources from the Western Front. And he planned to do that by hitting key British infrastructure, like the Uganda Railway. That was a major target.
Right. Hit them where it hurts locally. And while von Lettow-Vorbeck is actively planning attacks, we've also got Portugal involved. Officially neutral, but already kind of compromising that. The sources call it a vocarectly dubiosin lodge, dubious legal situation.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. It was entirely down to their centuries-old alliance with the UK. You see, by mid-August 1914, Portugal was already providing logistical support to the Allies, allowing Allied troops passage through their ports, supplying British ships, things like that.
So violating their own neutrality.
Pretty much. And the Germans noticed, especially when they were denied the same privileges. So it created this situation where conflict with Portuguese territories was, almost inevitable, even before any formal declaration of war.
Which brings us to where von Lettow-Vorbeck's defiance leads. You'd think if he wanted war, he'd launch some big strategic attack. But instead, the first really devastating land conflict was carried out by this small, almost bizarrely led unit. August 24th, 1914. The Maziúa Incident.
Yeah, this is just a perfect illustration of how quickly things could spin out of control locally. Maziúa was just a small Portuguese post in northern Portuguese East Africa, modern Mozambique, right across the Rovuma River border from German territory.
And tell us about the leader of the German raiding party. This is the strange part, isn't it?
It really is. The German unit, only about 30 men, was led by a staff surgeon, Wolfgang Weck.
A surgeon.
A surgeon, supposedly in the area on an inspection tour for sleeping sickness cases. And on the Portuguese side, the small police garrison, also led by a medical professional, a naval medical bosun named Eduardo Costa, just 27 years old.
Wow. So 2 medical officers facing off, one leading a combat mission. It's hard to picture. So Weck's troop crosses the river, launches a surprise attack early morning. What happened?
Well, the post was quickly overrun. The attack resulted in 10 to 12 casualties on the Portuguese side. That included Costa himself and one woman.
And the most tragic part,
The victims had absolutely no idea the First World War had even started. They were just annihilated in this surprise attack, completely unaware of the global context.
That ignorance just makes it profoundly disturbing, doesn't it? And the cover story that Weck thought the post was held by rebels, does that hold up?
Not really, no, especially when you look at the timing and the orders. The attack aligns directly with von Lettow-Vorbeck's August 10th order to attack targets in both Belgian Congo and Portuguese East Africa.
Even though there was no state of war with Portugal yet.
Exactly. It was completely preemptive based on Lettow-Vorbeck's initiative. And after the attack, the Germans burned the buildings, but quite cruelly, they just left the dead unburied before withdrawing.
That's brutal. So this unauthorized raid by a medical unit leads to deaths and a major diplomatic headache, right?
Huge headache. But because Maziúa was so remote, news actually took 4 months to reach the Portuguese government down in Lourenço Marques. It arrived December 15th, 1914.
4 months.
4 months. And this, combined with other German-Portuguese fighting already happening in Angola, caused severe diplomatic tension.
How did they smooth things over? Because Germany needed Portugal, didn't they?
They did. Tensions were only really eased by an official apology from Governor Schnee himself. This was vital because, ironically, after the main German radio links were cut, communication back to Germany was often routed through neutral Portugal.
Wow, okay, so Schnee manages to patch things up diplomatically for the moment. But while that's unfolding slowly, the actual shooting war was already happening elsewhere, on the water.
Absolutely. The naval aspect kicked off almost immediately. The British were, quite rightly, very worried about German ports like Dar es Salaam being used as bases for commerce raiders.
And were they?
Oh, yes. The German light cruiser SMS Königsberg had already left Dar es Salaam on July 31st. Just days after war was declared in Europe, on August 6th, she sank the British steamer City of Winchester, way up near Oman.
So the war at sea started very quickly. How did the British respond?
They hit back fast. The British cruiser HMS Pegasus bombarded the wireless mast at Dar es Salaam just 2 days later on August 8th, trying to disrupt communications.
So this back and forth establishes the East African coast as an active war zone pretty much from day one. What happened when the Königsberg came back?
Well, that was a tactical win for the Germans initially. The Königsberg returned in September, found the Pegasus undergoing repairs near Zanzibar, and sank her on September 14th.
Okay, so naval action on the coast. But you mentioned the Great Lakes earlier. Did the fighting spread inland too?
Immediately. Controlling the inland waterways was absolutely critical. German forces initially secured naval superiority on Lake Tanganyika very early on. They had armed steamers there.
And Lake Victoria, that's huge.
Yes, and crucial. The British initially lost control there too. But they pulled off a really remarkable logistical feat.
What did they do?
They used the Uganda Railway. They dismantled 2 armed motorboats, shipped them piece by piece overland by rail all the way to Port Florence, that's Kisumu today, on Lake Victoria.
No way.
Yes. They reassembled them there, christened them HMS Mimi and HMS Tutu, launched them, and basically surprised and neutralized the German boats on Lake Victoria. It shows how vital that railway was.
So controlling the lakes, controlling the railway.
Yeah.
Infrastructure was key. But as the campaign dragged on, it turned into more of a bush war.
Exactly. A protracted guerrilla campaign, really.
And the sources seem to reveal that the biggest enemy wasn't necessarily the other side's soldiers, but maybe the land itself, the logistics.
Absolutely. The logistics were punishing. And this brings us to the narrative around commanders like von Lettow-Vorbeck. He was celebrated as this brilliant guerrilla fighter in post-war Germany, a hero even.
I've heard that.
But that narrative completely, tragically obscures the catastrophic consequences for the African population.
How so? What was the human cost?
Well, the asymmetry is just staggering. The war in East Africa was fought overwhelmingly by Africans under European officers. You had Askaris on both sides, Ruga militia supporting the Germans, and most critically, the carriers.
Carriers for supplies.
Yes, porters. While the German forces numbered around 15,500 troops total, the Allies eventually fielded up to 250,000 soldiers and support personnel. But the real numbers, the ones that define the scale, were the support personnel, especially the carriers.
And you mentioned the carrier corps earlier. The numbers are just horrifying, aren't they?
They really are. Estimates suggest around 1 million African carriers were used by all sides throughout the war.
1 million.
Yeah. Maybe over 750,000 for the Allies, perhaps 100,000 to 200,000 for the Germans. Initially, they were recruited, but as the war dragged on and casualties mounted, they were often just forcibly pressed into service at gunpoint.
And the casualties among these carriers, the non-combatants, they dwarfed the combat losses, didn't they?
Obviously. Easily. The main killers weren't bullets. It was disease, dysentery, pneumonia, malaria. It was hunger. It was the sheer brutality of the forced marches and labor.
Do we have estimates?
Somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 carriers are thought to have died. Just carriers alone.
Staggering.
And think about the ripple effect. The armies took the fittest young men as carriers. Their removal from their villages, from farming, directly contributed to the next catastrophe.
Yeah.
Mass famine among the civilian population left behind.
So the impact on civilians was enormous. How did the army's movements make things worse?
Constant requisitioning. Armies on the move needed food, livestock. They took it from local communities, often leaving nothing. And sometimes, like with the German Schutztruppe, they deliberately burned fields and granaries to deny supplies to the pursuing allies.
Scorched earth tactics.
Pretty much, which just escalated the crisis. In German East Africa alone, the resulting famine, combined with drought conditions around 1918, led to hundreds of thousands of deaths. Some districts, like Dodoma, reportedly lost maybe 20% of their entire population in just a year or two.
Good heavens.
The total estimated death toll for the colony from the war and its direct consequences, around 650,000 lives.
650,000, just in that one colony. And this level of brutality, it was amplified by atrocities, too, blurring lines between combatants and civilians.
Yes. Both sides feared espionage intensely, and this is the shocking context often erased from those heroic war stories you hear.
What kind of things happened?
Well, in the first couple of years, German standing orders on the northern border were simply to shoot any unknown person on sight instantly.
Just shoot them.
Yes. And we know from various sources, including German ones, that both German and Belgian troops engaged in widespread looting, violence against civilians. There's a quote from a German doctor, Ludwig Depp, who traveled with von Lettow-Vorbeck's force.
What did he say?
His memoirs are quite stark, he wrote. We left behind destroyed fields, looted magazines, and, for the immediate future, hunger. Our trace consisted of death, plundering, and destroyed damages.
Our trace consisted of death, plundering, and destroyed villages. That's incredibly bleak.
It paints a very different picture from the tales of heroic resistance, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So the ultimate irony here is just stark, isn't it? A war supposedly governed by international law, the Congo Act, kicks off with an unauthorized raid by a dubious medical officer at Maziúa, fueled by a commander, von Lettow-Vorbeck, explicitly refusing to accept neutrality. And it just spirals rapidly into this devastating conflict measured in hundreds of thousands of civilian casualties.
That's the crux of it. On the global scale, the military campaign in East Africa was, a sideshow compared to the Western Front.
Right.
But its human cost was absolutely staggering. 650,000 estimated civilian lives lost in German East Africa alone, plus those hundreds of thousands of terriers who perished across the region. The war's main legacy there wasn't really changing the map long term. It was the massive loss of life, the famine, the disease that followed, including the 1918 Spanish flu, which just tore through the already weakened population, claiming tens of thousands more victims.
So think about this then. How that heroic narrative, the one built around figures like von Lettow-Vorbeck in post-war Germany, completely erased those true devastating costs.
Yeah.
The sources we've looked at today, they reveal that the conflict, often framed as military ingenuity against the odds, was in reality rooted in brutality, forced requisitioning, immense suffering. And that suffering was borne almost entirely by the people of East Africa.